Hello and welcome to a discussion about AI in education. About halfway through this year, several teachers I know saw something kind of remarkable where all of a sudden, about half the papers that were coming in were written by ChatGPT. And this was new, and it really brought up the question like, what does this mean for education? When you can have a paper like an assignment to maybe write a historical analysis of an event, 20 pages with a convincing argument. What does it mean when ChatGPT or another AI learning system can spit that out in seconds? So I am Jenny, also known as Science Mom, and I have a lot of experience teaching in the classroom setting, especially elementary and middle school. I've presented science lessons to more than 1,000 different in-person classrooms and many more through my YouTube channel. And this is my brother. Introduce yourself, Jepson.
Okay, I am Jepson Taylor, and I've spent the last 18 years building AI systems for hedge funds, for Intel and Micron, and I've run data science teams, and it's been my whole life.
So Jepson is an expert in AI, and I've got experience in education. And we wanted to talk with you about this upcoming transformation because it's going to be big. It's already disrupted the lives of most secondary teachers that I know. And I'm curious for those watching live, let us know in the chat really quick, are you a teacher or are you a student? I think we're going to have a mix of both. Mostly we're going to be talking to teachers today, but a lot of what we're saying is going to apply to students as well. And there'll be some good things that you can learn about how you can use AI to improve your own learning and education. So quick hello to, I see we have Science Mom Liza and Science Mom Amber here. Thank you for moderating and gathering questions. We have Tina. I saw that we have Grace watching in Canada. And I'm seeing a lot of students and parents coming in. So hello to Avery, to David, to Julia, a teacher from Los Angeles, and Anne, a parent. All right, so first off, we're gonna talk about calculators.
Yeah, they used to be on the naughty list. And when they first came out, there's a photo, if you search it online, teachers protesting calculators. It was in the news. Teachers did not like this. They felt like students have to learn the fundamentals.
Yeah, and there was this fear that if you give every student a calculator, then students are going to be weak in math. They're not going to understand how calculations work, and they're going to rely on the calculator as a crutch. And we see some of those same worries with AI, and I think it's important first and foremost to remember AI is a tool, just like a calculator is a tool. And if someone only uses a calculator for arithmetic, is it possible that they're just going to be really weak with their arithmetic skills?
Well, I actually have a personal story attached to this. So I fell in love with calculus because I had the TI-89, and it does the pretty print, and it's able to do a lot of the intermediate steps. So you might make the argument that my math was weak. But when I was studying for my master's, a big part of my thesis was a mathematical breakthrough. And that mathematical breakthrough was profound enough in my industry that my advisor wanted my thesis to be kept secret for a year. So it's a big mathematical breakthrough. But if you asked, how did I find the breakthrough? It was software. And this will go into this bigger theme that will show up from time to time. And this is this concept of experience, because this mathematical breakthrough, it required this infinite series called, believe it's called a polylog. And that's not something I would have stubbed my toe on through my life experience, but using software, it quickly was able to find something that I would have had to spend my whole life, and I would have had to become lucky to find it. And so I think that theme is very powerful with AI. You don't need to stumble upon some piece of knowledge. It will bring it to you.
I like that. And just like, currently, I don't know many people who are afraid of a calculator or feel like students shouldn't use a calculator because they realize that a student can still get the fundamentals of arithmetic, and the calculator is a tool that lets you do more and experience more math and do it more efficiently. And AI is going to be the similar way. So first, real quick, let's talk a little bit about what is learning. What's the point of learning? And if you're watching live, I would love for people to put a couple comments in the chat because this is something that's important to think about. A lot of times when we're looking at a specific task, like, write an English essay for an English 101 class in college, we're just looking at that metric and we think that that's the point. But is that really the point of English, is writing a paper? The point goes a little deeper, right? So what would you say the point of education is?
So in my industry, when we talk about intelligence, we define it as the ability to acquire knowledge through experience. So that would be teaching, but there's a key part to that definition that keeps going. And it says, and to apply that knowledge to future decisions. So if I, and going back to teaching, I don't know if you're guilty of this, but I've definitely been guilty of this where you cram, especially in college. I'm going to drink energy drinks. I'm going to stay up all night. And I used to brag about this. I could just read 3 chapters of organic chemistry, and I would do okay. I do well on the midterm exam, but the alarm bells that should be going off in everyone's minds are, but are you going to retain that for future decisions? No one cares how you did on a midterm. That you might care in the moment. Like that's very tempting. Like, oh, test tomorrow, good grade.
Mhm.
But ultimately, I think the final destination with learning is you need to be able to apply it, and ultimately that's the goal.
So back to organic chemistry. If you're working in a lab, no one cares how you did on your midterm in organic chemistry, but being able to come up with a plan to synthesize a new molecule that's needed, that's really important.
And I think this will play in well to the discussion around GPT-4 because ultimately, and we were talking about this last night to get ready for this, and maybe I'm getting ahead a little bit, but there's 2 parts. One part is you have to protect the brand of the institution. Like that is a priority. You don't want that to just, go in all directions. But then the other thing is you have to have a lot of loyalty to the learner. What is the learner? What are the activities in the future that this learner will be doing?
So if you're going to say to trade school to be a plumber, and if everyone graduating from this training program can't fix pipes or repair, leaky faucets, that looks really bad for the repair program, right? And you could say the same about Harvard. If people graduating from Harvard aren't able to do certain tasks, that looks bad on the institution, but also that whoever's doing the education, they have a responsibility to the learner to prepare them for real life.
Absolutely.
And yeah, and good comment from Tina about language being super, super important. So let's keep that in mind as we go forward. And now we're going to kind of switch to just talking about ways you can use AI to improve education. So the goal of education is, and will you rephrase that one more time, about it's not just about collecting knowledge.
It's collecting knowledge through experience. So the process of learning to apply to future decisions. So you're going to make decisions. Do I pour chemical A into the speaker? Do I leave it in the hood for this long? If we want to keep going with the chemistry analogy. And if you make a bad decision, it can cost money, but it can also, in some cases, it can be dangerous.
And I would add to that another important point of education is to learn how to think, to learn how to think critically, to be able to evaluate the information around us and to be able to reason.
Well, and this is a profound point that you bring up because I studied chemical engineering, and during my undergrad, if I felt prepared graduating to answer problems if I had the books. And then when I went to graduate school, I felt prepared to answer new problems that weren't in my books. And so I think ultimately the bar, it's not to be able to repeat a recipe, a knowledge recipe. Like that is a great milestone. We should all celebrate that milestone that I'm able to recreate this mathematical process or this apply this knowledge. But ultimately, the highest goal is to apply it to new problems. Like imagine a teacher teaching their students, and the students can do the problems the teacher was aware of. Ultimately, you want the students to go and do problems that the teacher was unaware of.
Yeah.
It's like the hero's journey. Like you want these future innovators to find new knowledge.
So speaking specifically of ChatGPT, but there are other language models that are coming out as well. And what we're talking about should apply to a lot of different AI systems. Let's talk about teachers first. How can teachers use AI to improve learning for their students? What maybe top 3 tips would you give?
So I think one of the most important things is they should begin using it selfishly for themselves. So if you have a lesson that you're planning, there's some topics. This would actually be a fun discussion. What would be a topic that you would be the least excited to teach, like a science topic? Maybe this is a good question for you. What has been one of your most challenging topics where you're spinning, thinking I don't know how to make this topic exciting or attainable?
So actually, I have personal experience with this fairly recently using ChatGPT because I was working on a lesson on Newton's third law of motion, and people commonly know this as for every action there's equal and opposite reaction. But that's catchy little paradigm that people know has inherent misconceptions in it, and people commonly misunderstand it. Like when a bug hits a moving car,
Mhm.
They both experience equal force. The reason the bug gets splatted and the car doesn't, get slowed down by the bug is
Mhm.
because the difference in mass, but the forces they experience are actually equal. So I was thinking about this lesson. I was like, okay, we've got to address this common misconception. And everything I was trying, I just felt like wasn't working. I
Mhm.
was I was writing out a lesson plan in a way where I was like, oh, I'm going to reinforce this misconception. So I actually asked ChatGPT. I said, write a lesson plan that addresses this misconception. And I went through several iterations just asking for ideas, and I got some really good analogies that then I wove into the notes.
Mhm.
So I honestly think it saved me 20 hours of work.
Yeah. Well, it's humans. A few humans have been able to do this in the past. This is a very rare trait. When I was in chemical engineering, a lot of these books are terrible. And we were joking last night. I have them. We can go read them. You will agree. These are terrible books. They're thermodynamics and these very heavy topics. But there was a book, and I'll never forget the author's name. His name was Vogler. It was written at the fifth grade level. And this is a master's level kinetics book, so chemical reactions.
Mhm.
And I would argue I could give this book to anyone. I don't care what your background is, I'll give it to you. And if you read it page by page, you will keep up. And so, for over a decade, for many decades, we celebrated this author. Can you believe that Folkler wrote this at the fifth grade level? But it's a graduate level course. And
So it's a
so,
complex topic, but he made it more accessible, more interesting, and more fun to read
yes,
by breaking it down at a more entry level.
yeah. And everything else that we read it felt soulless. It's almost like the equivalent of taking your medicine. Like you just
Mhm.
have to take your medicine. You're not going to like it, but and I think that is the opportunity for teachers. The other thing is teachers. I used to do capstone projects with a local university, and I stopped doing that. I did 3 in a row,
Mhm.
and I stopped doing them because the space is changing so quickly. It's having to be reinvented every 3 months. And so I think one of the things the teachers need to do is, if they're embracing it for themselves, they're going to realize that the syllabus and the knowledge that they're able to acquire is going to change. And ultimately, even if we had a huge brainstorming session, if we tried to perfect the process and how to integrate this today, it would be guaranteed to be outdated when your kids are leaving. And so I I think one of the biggest gifts is giving kids the passion to learn and curiosity.
Mhm.
Like if you can give them curiosity and passion to learn, there's nothing you can do to ultimately prepare them finally for where we're going because it's changing so quickly. We can anticipate what this will do,
Yeah.
but it's an exciting time to be alive.
It is, and it's challenging to keep up. I've got a really good question from Stephanie. Are you not concerned that AI will affect your working memory? Like remembering phone numbers is no longer a thing people just do. We don't. And I love that analogy because I have to say, when we went to get passports for our kids a few years ago, the person asked our kids like they needed to know like their home address and three different phone numbers. And the first one, my phone number, my cell phone was easy because I'd really drilled into them. You need to know this number. But then when she started asking us, how many other phone numbers do you know? Like, could you call your grandparents? I realized when I was a high schooler, I probably knew 9 or 10 different phone numbers that I just had memorized off the top of my head.
Hmm.
And I struggled to come up with three as an adult because I never use them. I just say,
Hmm.
call Oma, call my brother, call.
Hmm. I think of the brain as like
So,
an operating system, like because a great example that's right on point with this is a software developer. They go to school, they go to college, they know a lot of things, but most software developers are unable to write code without the internet because they rely on Stack Overflow. They rely on these tools. They even before GPT, they already
mhm,
relied on these tools. You ask me to do something. Some things I can just do from working memory, or sometimes we joke that it's muscle memory.
yeah.
You're typing things and you're surprised. You're wow, where's all this coming from? But we've already relied on these things, and that ultimately I don't see them as handicaps because you're moving faster than you would otherwise, but you're not spending time memorizing every possible function.
Mhm.
And it's but with things that are evolving quickly, you need to have a dynamic reference because a lot of functions are dynamically being updated. That if I remembered something in my working memory from last year,
It might not.
It's not even going to be the same.
So with software and development
Oh.
and programming, you're saying things change enough that your working memory might not be enough because things are off being updated and
Yeah.
evolving.
But if we have Google Glass and if we have all these tools where we don't remember number sequences and we don't remember names because we don't have to, AI will, dynamically remind you. That is funny to think about when you have a technology failure. Because then you have a bunch of people that say, I know you, but I don't remember your name because I've relied on this technology crutch for my existence.
So quick sum up to a couple of big ideas we've talked about so far. So with education, AI can definitely help us. It can help us acquire knowledge more quickly, and it can also help evaluate. So something that I've done myself with preparing our upcoming physics class, I've asked ChatGPT to evaluate my knowledge in a certain area. So I'll say, assess my knowledge of thermodynamics, and then suggest a plan for improving it. And then ChatGPT in a dialogue will ask me questions and I'll answer them. And after about 10 questions, it'll say, okay, you understand this concept well. This concept, it seems like you have some misconceptions or you just don't know enough about it. I would recommend reading XYZ. So AI can be used as a tool for assessing knowledge as well. Any other tips for how students and teachers can use it? And I would say if you're a teacher right now, if you haven't used ChatGPT or Bard or some of the other large language models, it really is important to start getting familiar with them just because they are so quickly becoming integrated into so many different things. So understanding how to interact with them and to use it as a tool to have useful results is becoming an important skill.
Well, it's really good for ideation. So you can imagine if a teacher is working on a particular lesson, the idea, well, if you are overwhelmed by the work, that, I've got to climb this mountain, you're going to have less energy for creativity on object lessons and all these fun handouts and things you can do. You're not even going to think about it because you're just trying to get across the finish line. But with GPT-4, if it's able to get you across the finish line easier with your lesson plans, with your organization, it can then help you by suggesting 5 creative object lessons or other things. And so that's one of the things I love about it is you can ask for, I need these 5 creative ideas and I need them ranked and I need relative scoring. And then you can look at that list and you can pick one. You can say, oh, that, or you can, bring the human side and modify it. So I see it as just a really good brainstorming tool.
I want to ask you as we wrap up, and be sure to put questions in the chat now because we are going to wrap up in a few minutes, but I want to just throw 3 or 4 scenarios at you from a teacher's point of view and then have you give advice. So the first scenario is someone who's teaching English 101 at a college, and all of a sudden all their papers are generated by AI and they can't really tell, is this the student or is this not? How can they help their students learn the necessary skill of writing? And what could they do to assess whether their students actually know how to write or if they're just asking GPT to write their papers for them?
That's so when we were talking about this last night, one of the issues, if they have a knee-jerk reaction, they say, absolutely not, we're going to ban this, which I do not recommend. You will have some students that still get past the filters because they have additional AI tools that will humanize it more. Or if I'm better at prompt engineering, giving it my examples. And so I think we have to change how we grade. So the analogies to think about are, think of spelling and grammar. That might be something that teachers they're not necessarily checking for because software has been able to catch most of that for the students. And so just like they stopped finding issues with grammar and spelling, they're going to have fewer issues with structure, with arguments, with knowledge. And so if I was a teacher, I would change the grading rubric where I would probably be, I might grade on whether or not this is concise. I might grade on whether or not this feels synthetic. And I might grade on whether if there's anything that is stated that's factually wrong, then that's going to be a big penalty because you don't want to propagate incorrect information, and these algorithms can. And so that'd be an example of a student that's sloppy. And so a sloppy student, who are they ultimately cheating? Themselves. So it's the day before the assignment. Oh no, I completely forgot that I have this essay due. They throw it in. It's not going to be concise. It's going to feel very synthetic. and it could be riddled with errors and mistakes, that knowledge mistakes, not
Mhm.
grammar or written mistakes. But someone who's brilliant with prompt engineering, who's really learning to use the tool, it's gonna they'll have the emotional energy to add style. And when I think of you and I writing, I we just had to get done. Now you can add style.
Mhm.
You might write in a certain you might aspire to write like these certain authors, and GPT-4 is helping you. But I might prefer different authors that have a different type of wit or edge, or I like their argument style, or I like a hybrid. And so the 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 other thing to think about is the explosion with Midjourney. So Midjourney is the AI art generation tools.
Mhm.
It's not hurting human creativity; it's inspiring creative. So I would hope that GPT-4 would inspire creative writers, that they are able to enjoy that process more.
No, excellent. I like those ideas. Second scenario for you is a homeschool family where the parent wants to help the child learn how to use ChatGPT or another language learning model,
Hmm.
but wants to be sure that the student is actually learning more. So, what would you recommend for them? Let's say that their student needs to write an essay about George Washington. What would
Hmm.
you recommend for them to use AI as a tool, but make sure that this is not replacing their students' learning experience, but enhancing it? Maybe give like top 3 steps.
Um, so, so what they have to be reading it. So just because it writes an essay, if you catch them that they didn't read it, that's a big deal.
Mhm.
Like you need to fix that. Because if they're reading it, then they're kind of assessing, is this good writing? Do I want to change this? Do I want this paragraph? The other thought too is you need to give them an opportunity to do creative writing that is unbounded. So, report on George Washington, the template is you're you're kind of restricting my creativity.
Mhm.
So it's important to give those, and this is where you can really see their writing come out. You can say, do a creative writing piece, and then pick a genre, pick something. It's less of a report. That way, it allows me to. You would hope to see that they are writing, they're being more creative, or they're having more fun with the argument, or they're able to keep your attention. Um,
And with ChatGPT 4, like back to the George Washington example, you wouldn't expect someone to just do a single prompt, get an output, and say, I'm done. What does the process look like? Like if you want to get a really good essay on George Washington, this quick example that I just pulled out of my head. How many times would you iterate? Would you just put in one prompt and then be done, or would you go back and forth?
I would go back and forth, and it it's really starting at a high level.
Hmm.
So to write a really good essay, so if you and I were competing, that we're going to write the best George Washington essay using GPT-4, and I know you're doing something and I'm doing something. I want an essay that has new ideas. Like that would be a theme. I don't want the teacher to read a perspective that they've read before,
Hmm.
because it's a waste of their time. But also, I'm not going to stand out as a student. So I would spend a lot of time trying to just create a brainstorm of what are some creative arguments with George Washington, or what are some lesser known analogies that maybe that people might be less aware of, or what are some
And then you would have ChatGPT be giving you like
yeah.
lists, and you would be kind of evaluating and ranking.
Yeah,
Like,
be
okay,
giving me lists, and then I would come up with the overall arching themes. But the other really fun thing is, um, with writing these reports, I feel like people just went off to the races without understanding the superpower of storytelling.
hmm
And so I could be brainstorming all of these concepts, analogies, and potential arguments, but also working over here on, I need a strong through line. I want to make sure that attention is maintained. I want to have some novelty. I could be leveraging the storytelling component, and then I would go to templating. Now I'm going to template my arguments. Like
hmm
what's my introduction? What's the body? But it also might also open the door for creativity. That I've seen this type of argument before. Give me 5 other variants, like,
hmm
because it's kind of the classical hypothesis, and maybe I'm like, I don't, you know what, I don't really like that. I want to have the hypothesis in the middle, or I want to have a surprise.
Yeah.
And so getting through the structure, and then ultimately I'm going to write a report, but my report is going to be very unique. Everyone else that just pulled the trigger and wrote it, it's going to no new ideas, standard template, and And then we already talked about the gotchas. If, oh, you didn't read it, you didn't
Mhm.
read your own writing, and there's something that's factually wrong, and it feels synthetic. Like you could go down the list of I'm disappointed in this
Yeah.
exercise.
And Generator points out going back and forth is the best way to get better
Oh,
results.
yeah.
And I'll say absolutely. When I use ChatGPT and when I've played around with using other large language learning models, I never just put in what I'm looking for and then take that first result and say, okay, I'm done.
Mhm.
Almost always I will iterate and I will go back again and again and refine. But I gotta say it's so useful for brainstorming,
Mhm.
like, and back to this simple essay idea, say, list 10 ideas for a 3-paragraph essay on George Washington in order from most interesting to least interesting, rate them on a scale of 1 to 10
Mhm.
and include 2 that have humor and 2 that are lesser known or obscure facts. And ChatGPT will generate a list, and from there you've got a good brainstorm.
Mhm.
So Heather has a really great question. What about as a parent with a very tech-savvy child who already knows that it's a tool that he can use? Um, I tell him to use it for ideas, and he needs to come up with his own. How do I work with it? And I think probably in our audience we have a lot of parents. And actually, I saw a national survey looking at use with ChatGPT, and it is used more widely among teens and young adults than it is older adults.
Mhm.
So, how can parents kind of catch up if they feel like their kids already know more about this than they do, and they just want to kind of get ahead and make sure they're using it for learning?
So I think there's a very elegant way that parents can get involved. So if I know my child is going to use this to create an essay, I might want to have a checkpoint. So the checkpoint would be going back to those stages. They had the ideation, open brainstorm, they had the templating. And if they sit down with the templating, they haven't written this document. And if I'm looking at the template and then I say, this is great, but what are your ideas? Like this is good, but what are
Mhm.
your ideas? And if you're kind of forcing them to inject their own ideas, then um, I think that would be a good way because you don't want to discourage them from using it all. Because this goes back to what are we ultimately doing with this learner? This learner is going to go out into the real world and they're going to be competing. You have to think about who they're competing against. So your kid is going to go out in the real world, and let's say as a parent, I held back. No, you
No AI. Don't use AI at all.
no AI, or you can use it a little bit for this, but ultimately you write every word.
Mhm.
And now consider if I have a kid where I say you use it for everything, and I'm working on this templating thing, and every essay you do needs to be award winning. You can begin to set the bar really really high. And when both of these people go into the workforce, one of them is being incredibly competitive on proposals, legalese, going through legal documents. Like
Mhm.
they're able to work 10 times faster than this individual. And so it really, you have to ultimately think about where they're going. You can't be stuck in the unit of work that they're doing today.
That's a really good thought. We're coming up on the end of time. I'm gonna check really quick to see what questions our moderators gathered for us. And yeah, another quick call. If you have questions, toss them in the chat. We're gonna do like rapid fire Q&A now. So, all right, good question from David Chapman. What's the difference between AI and programming? And I will say we're not going to answer like the what is AI question entirely because we have a separate live stream on Wednesday that's going to go into that in more detail. But talk real quick just about difference between AI and programming, AI and a robot. Like, give us just a real quick like the large language learning models like
Okay.
ChatGPT. Kind of basically, how does it work?
So programming, think of it as an umbrella. So programming is the widest umbrella that allows you to build these algorithms or digital tools that sit on a computer. A computer without programming is useless. It's just a bunch of wires. It doesn't do anything. AI is a component of programming. So people that build artificial intelligence systems, large language models, they're doing a lot of programming behind the scenes. And within AI, you have other groups like machine learning, deep learning. There are some more technical terms, but it's all digital tools. You're building just like you have a wheel or a hammer. You're building something that's much more um, interesting within a computer. So that's how I define the difference. AI is a part of programming, but programming is just building digital tools.
That's a good way to sum it up. And the large language learning models like ChatGPT, they can do programming. You could ask it to program. Just give a quick example of something that you could ask ChatGPT, and it would do in programming.
It can do nearly anything. So it can build a website. It can actually write AI code. Last night, my daughter was asking how to make money. She wants to make money digitally in a way that is significant, and I told her, well, we actually asked GPT-4, and it was telling me you could program, you could do these different things. And I said, well, you can learn how to program. And she said, well, I don't know how to program. And I said, it's really easy. Watch. And I pull out my phone and I speak to it. Write a program that does this. And then Riley sees all the code being written. And I say, congratulations, you wrote your first program. Like, it's making it so much more approachable for more people.
And I see that another comment I want to touch on real quick, also from David Chapman, AI is cool, but is it dangerous? And maybe we can just, now specifically to education, I think the danger is that students and teachers would use it as a crutch to replace thinking and learning. And you don't want to replace your learning experience. Like let's go back to the assignment of writing a paper. If you have an assignment to write a paper and you just go and put it into ChatGPT, paper comes out, you don't read it, you turn it in, what you've really done is cheat yourself out of the opportunity to improve your writing and learn more about the subject. But if, like you said, if you have the stages of iterating and saying, going to AI to generate ideas, choosing the ideas you like best, then coming up with a type of an argument and drafting and fine-tuning, then you've used AI to deepen your learning. And in this case, I would say that's not cheating. That's using a tool to achieve the objective of education even better. But are there any specific dangers with AI in the classroom setting do you think parents or teachers should be aware of, be careful about?
Yeah, think of it as a catalyst that makes you move faster. So AI can make you do great things faster. It can make bad people do bad things faster, but there's actually one in the middle. It can make people with good intentions, unconscious bias, do things. Like if I apply AI to hiring with resume, it might introduce a bias. It's not coming from AI. It's coming from
the data set.
From the data set, from the humans. And so we talk a lot about unintended consequences of AI. And that's why it's so important if you're applying it to a particular process. If I'm applying it to grade papers, as a teacher, I might love that. I can rank all these essays. I don't have to read them. And not only am I ranking them, it's calling out the top 3 praises, the top 3 criticisms. Like this would be great from a grading perspective, but I need to think about the potential problems. Like what, and so we have plenty of examples in the past where AI has caused harm.
Well, and can I just say real quick, there was a story in the news recently where a teacher in Florida, in a university, took the term papers from his history class, put them into ChatGPT-4 and asked, was this paper written by ChatGPT? And this is something that ChatGPT is not necessarily trained well to do, to recognize its own writing. And then he flunked his whole class and said that every student used this, AI to write their papers, therefore they shouldn't be able to graduate. And he requested a hold on their diplomas. And so it kind of blew up and made news. But a lot of people were really upset with him there because they're like, you didn't use that tool appropriately. It's not designed. There are other tools that are designed to kind of evaluate whether a paper was written by AI or not.
Yeah. Well, that's sad because the teacher's missing the point. Like he tried to put the emergency brakes on this new technology when these kids are getting ready to go out in the real world. And if you're graduating and if you have a core competency in GPT-4, you're way more marketable right now. Like if you want to get multiple job offers in a tech recession, you need to be savvy with GPT-4.
Yeah, and I would just echo that. Like this is being AI is an exciting. It's an exciting era to be alive, right? Like there is so much changing so quickly. But for a classroom setting, especially, I would encourage teachers to use this tool to make things that are currently difficult for you a little easier, like brainstorming ideas for a lesson. If you know that you need to teach a lesson about subject Y, and you usually use object lesson X, but you feel like it just doesn't work very well, you can ask AI, come up with 10 ideas as an object lesson for this topic, and have them have supplies that cost less than $15, and they should be able to be presented in a classroom.
Yeah,
And
you can even put a time limit on it. This entire thing needs to take 5 minutes or 10 minutes. That's all.
Yeah.
It's an explosion of creativity in every single function.
All right, we are just about out of time. Any parting words, advice for students or teachers?
If you haven't tried it yet, definitely start trying it. And I would encourage you to try GPT-4. It is $20 a month, but I think it's very much worth it.
So you're saying there's a significant difference. I saw Jen Raya had commented that they were using it to learn C+ programming language, but that it seemed like it was kind of limited, like didn't have very good abilities. So would you say that was probably GPT 3.5? Like
make sure you're using it, the 4.0. And I guess I'm curious why. So C++ is not the friendliest language to teach someone. So I guess another question would be, why was it C++ and not Python? And sometimes this goes back to curriculum being outdated. Teachers do not keep up to date. And this actually reminds me, one of my old neighbors.
Oh, and Jen says it was version 4.
Oh,
and
okay.
We do have a live stream about specific. We have some things specifically about prompt engineering, because prompt engineering is a skill, and it's entirely possible, even with GPT-4, to you want this outcome, and you put in this prompt, and you don't get it, and sometimes it takes some troubleshooting to figure out why it's not being as helpful.
Well, it's also going to do better with some of the more popular languages, because that's how these models learn, the more they consume. And so something like Python or JavaScript, it probably is going to have a lot more. This reminds me of a story. Sometimes these professors and teachers will get stuck in. I had a neighbor kid that was learning to program in high school. This was 5 years ago. And his dad had him come over because I can help him. And I think he was learning COBOL, or like, when I found out what he was being taught in school, I was so angry, because it's so outdated, it's useless. And this is fascinating, because that example caused more harm than good. It would have been better for the kid to not learn programming. The teacher poisoned the well. And I'm serious, like, it was that terrible. It's hard to use, it's outdated, and then the lessons is like a shoe inventory store. Like, it's not fun.
Yeah.
It should be fun.
But and so with C++, do you feel like that's the same? So for this, I'm seeing in the chat, it was an assignment for an online high school class.
I would say that's outdated. So
Python or another language might be a little easier to use.
Yeah. So I'd be critical of the teacher. Why? Because a few things. So C++, there aren't as many jobs right now that are looking for it, but also it tends to be a little bit more difficult to learn. There's more steps involved, and the language is not as friendly. You have to write more code to do a shorter amount of things. And so if you compare the assignment and ask GPT-4 to write the Python equivalent,
it should work a lot better.
It may work better, but I would argue your student might feel more comfortable, though. Oh, this makes sense. This is it's you don't have to write as much code to get the same amount done. But I would say that's a time bias in the assignment or the teacher.
Gotcha. All right, speaking of time, we are just about out of time. Thank you so much for joining us. It was good to see you, Jen Raya, David Chapman, Tina. And if you are watching the replay, I hope that you enjoyed them.
Well, and Jen confirmed that industry new college grad friends can understand her assignment. So like that, and that's unfortunate, because it means you're learning. It's like the equivalent of, like, we're going to teach our kids Latin, and we're going to we're going to spend.
But Latin and Greek roots are everywhere in language. You got to pick a new analogy, because I'm going to call that one out. It's still useful to learn Latin.
What's an older language?
The roots are everywhere.
Whatever King Solomon spoke, or like, we're going to go
something completely outdated.
Yeah, or there's, like, if you go back to the really old English, it's quite funny. You can see all these
Chaucer and
crazy spellings and stuff. Like, if I was teaching, that's a better equivalent. I'm going to teach our kids Old English, where if they speak it, people won't understand them, and the utility's missing.
Okay, that is better, because your Latin example, I was like, no, learning Latin's awesome.
Yeah.
But Old English, speaking Old English, that would not be useful.
Yeah.
All right. And you could probably hear some noise in the background. Kids are up, and we've got to get them to school, because my brother, his kids are in their last week of school here. So we got to run. But thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you again Actually, tonight we have a live stream about future-proofing and how AI is going to impact jobs. So join us for that, and we'll see you later.
Thanks, everyone.